The dust swirled around Olivia Bennett's worn boots as she stood on the train platform in Nevada, Missouri, watching the last wisps of steam fade into the September sky of 1878, her heart sinking with the terrible realization that her husband was never coming back for her, and the three exhausted children clinging to her skirts. She had believed Samuel when he said he was going ahead to secure lodging, had trusted him when he kissed her forehead and promised to return within the hour. But 3 hours had passed, and the station master was now eyeing her with growing concern as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Her youngest, 2-year-old Margaret, whimpered against her hip while 5-year-old Thomas sat on their single trunk, his face smudged with travel dirt, and 8-year-old Clara stood rigid beside her, old enough to understand that something had gone terribly wrong. "Madam, I need to close up soon," the station master said, not unkindly but with the firmness of a man who had a schedule to keep. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Olivia's throat tightened. She had exactly $4.37 in her reticule, 3 children who had not eaten since morning, and the growing certainty that Samuel had abandoned them. The marriage had been strained since they left Ohio, his promises of a fresh start in the territories growing hollower with each passing mile, but she had never imagined this. She had never imagined standing alone in a strange town with everything she owned in a single trunk and 3 pairs of eyes looking to her for answers she did not have. "I'm waiting for my husband," she said, though the words felt like ash in her mouth. The station master's expression softened with pity, which somehow felt worse than judgment. "I'll give you until sundown, but then I really must lock up." Olivia nodded, unable to trust her voice. She smoothed Margaret's fine blonde hair and tried to think. The town of Nevada stretched before her, unfamiliar and indifferent. She could see the main street from where she stood, the false-fronted buildings painted in fading letters advertising dry goods, a saloon, a hotel she could not afford. Beyond that, rolling prairie stretched endlessly under a sky so vast it made her feel impossibly small. "Mama, I'm hungry," Thomas said quietly. "I know, sweetheart, soon." Clara's hand found hers and squeezed. The girl was trying to be brave, trying to be the helper she had always been, but Olivia could feel the tremor in those small fingers. The weight of her failure pressed down on her shoulders. She should have seen this coming. She should have known better than to trust a man who drank away their savings and blamed her for his disappointments. But knowing did not change their circumstances. Knowing did not put food in her children's bellies or a roof over their heads. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. A man was riding toward the station on a sturdy bay horse, leading 2 other mounts behind him. He sat easy in the saddle, the kind of natural horsemanship that spoke of years in the saddle. As he drew closer, Olivia could make out more details. A broad-shouldered frame, a weather-beaten hat pulled low, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same rugged landscape that surrounded them. He dismounted with fluid grace and tied the horses to the hitching post before turning toward the station. Their eyes met, and Olivia felt a strange jolt. His eyes were a startling shade of blue-green, like creek water in summer, and they held an intelligence and kindness that made her breath catch. He was perhaps 30 years old, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He tipped his hat to her, a gesture of respect that felt like a lifeline in her sea of despair. "Evening, madam," he said, his voice a deep rumble with a slight drawl that marked him as a man of the Western Territories. "You waiting on the eastbound?" "No, I." Olivia faltered, pride warring with desperation. Pride lost. "I'm waiting for my husband, but I fear he may not return." The cowboy's expression shifted, understanding dawning in those remarkable eyes. He glanced at the children, then at the single trunk, and she saw him piece together her situation with the quick assessment of a man accustomed to reading his surroundings. To her surprise, anger flashed across his features, gone so quickly she almost missed it. "How long have you been waiting?" "3 hours." He muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse, then seemed to make a decision. "The name's Quinton Miller. I've got a ranch about 8 miles north of here. If you and your young ones need a place to stay while you sort things out, I've got room for all." Olivia stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I couldn't possibly impose on a stranger. You've got a better option." Quinton's tone was gentle but direct. "Begging your pardon, madam, but the sun's going down and I don't see that husband of yours anywhere. The hotel in town isn't a place for a lady with children, not the way some of the drifters have been passing through lately. I've got a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who lives on the property with her husband. You'd have your own space and your children would be safe and fed. No strings, no expectations, just Christian charity." The mention of a housekeeper eased something in Olivia's chest. A married couple on the property meant propriety, meant she would not be alone with this stranger, meant she could accept without completely abandoning the rules that governed respectable behavior. Still, she hesitated. She had just been abandoned by one man. Why should she trust another? "Why would you help us?" The question came out sharper than she intended, but Quinton did not seem offended. "Because I can," he said simply. "Because those children are tired and hungry and you look about ready to drop. Because I've got more space than I know what to do with, and Mrs. Chen would skin me alive if she knew I left a family stranded at the station." He paused, then added more softly, "Because my mother was once in a similar situation, and a kind stranger helped her when she needed it most. I'm just returning the favor, years late." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. She looked down at Margaret, who had fallen into an exhausted doze against her shoulder, at Thomas with his pleading eyes, at Clara, who was trying so hard to be strong. She thought of the $4 in her reticule, of the uncertain night ahead, of the very real possibility that Samuel was gone for good. She thought of her pride, and then she thought of her children. "My name is Olivia Bennett," she said, lifting her chin. "These are my children, Clara, Thomas, and Margaret. If your offer is genuine, we would be grateful to accept." The relief on Quinton's face seemed disproportionate to the situation, as if he had been more worried about her refusal than she had realized. He smiled, and it transformed his features from handsome to something approaching beautiful. "It's genuine, I promise you. Now let's get you all loaded up. Thomas, is it? Think you can help me lift this trunk?" Thomas straightened immediately, eager to be useful, to be seen as capable. Together, he and Quinton hefted the trunk, though Olivia suspected the cowboy was doing most of the work while making it seem otherwise. He secured it to one of the pack horses with practiced efficiency, then turned back to them. "Mrs. Bennett, you and the little one can ride with me. Clara and Thomas can share the other horse. She's gentle as a kitten, I promise." "I don't know how to ride," Clara whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Quinton crouched down to her level, his expression serious and respectful. "That's all right. You'll be sitting in front of me on my horse then, and Thomas can ride with your mama on Daisy there. I won't let anything happen to you, Miss Clara. You have my word." Clara looked to Olivia, who nodded encouragement. The girl allowed Quinton to lift her onto the bay's saddle, her small hands gripping the horn with white-knuckled intensity. Quinton mounted behind her with easy strength, his arms coming around her to hold the reins, creating a secure cage that would keep her safe. Olivia found herself relaxing slightly at the sight. "All right, Thomas, let's get you situated," Quinton said, and helped Olivia mount the mare called Daisy before handing Thomas up to her. The boy settled in front of her, and she wrapped one arm around his waist while keeping the other secure around Margaret. As they left the station behind, Olivia allowed herself one last look back, half hoping to see Samuel running after them with apologies and explanations. But the platform was empty, and the station master was already closing up for the night. She turned forward, toward the darkening prairie and the stranger who had offered them sanctuary, and tried not to think too hard about what came next. The ride to the ranch took nearly an hour in the fading light. Quinton kept their pace steady but not rushed, mindful of his passengers' inexperience. He pointed out landmarks as they went, his voice calm and reassuring as he spoke to Clara about the different plants they passed, the animals she might see, the way the stars were beginning to emerge in the deepening sky. Olivia found herself listening to the timbre of his voice, the easy way he talked to her daughter, and felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. The ranch appeared gradually, rising from the prairie like something out of a dream. It was larger than Olivia had expected, with a sturdy two-story house painted white, a massive barn, several outbuildings and corrals that held dozens of horses. Lantern light glowed in the windows of the main house, warm and welcoming. As they approached, a woman emerged onto the porch, small and compact with graying black hair pulled into a neat bun. "Mr. Miller, what have you brought home now?" she called, but there was affection in her voice, a kind of fond exasperation that spoke of long familiarity. "Guests, Mrs. Chen. This is Mrs. Bennett and her children. They need a place to stay for a while." Mrs. Chen's sharp eyes took in the situation immediately. She hurried down the steps, her movements quick and efficient. Of course. Bring them inside. I've got stew still warm on the stove and the guest rooms are ready." Poor dears look exhausted. Quinton helped Clara down first, then took Margaret from Olivia's arms so she could dismount. The little girl did not even wake, so deeply asleep that her head simply rolled against his shoulder. Olivia's heart clenched at the sight of her daughter cradled so carefully in this stranger's arms, at the gentleness in his expression as he looked down at the sleeping child. Inside, the house was even more impressive. The main room was spacious and well-furnished, with comfortable-looking chairs, a stone fireplace and rugs that spoke of both comfort and prosperity. Everything was clean and well-maintained, the kind of home that reflected care and attention. Mrs. Chen bustled about, getting bowls of stew for Clara and Thomas, who ate with the desperate hunger of children who had gone too long without food. "The guest rooms are upstairs," Mrs. Chen said to Olivia. "There are 2 adjoining rooms, one with a large bed and one with 2 smaller beds. I thought perhaps the children in one room and you in the other. That would be perfect, thank you." Olivia's voice cracked slightly on the words. The kindness was overwhelming, threatening to break through the fragile control she had maintained all day. Quinton appeared in the doorway, having put the horses away. "I'll bring up your trunk in a moment. Mrs. Chen, could you show Mrs. Bennett to the rooms?" As Olivia followed the housekeeper upstairs, she heard Quinton settling into a chair with a creak of leather and wood, and she felt the strangest sense of safety she had experienced in months. The rooms were lovely, clean and bright with fresh linens and curtains that fluttered in the evening breeze. There was even a small bouquet of wildflowers on the dresser, as if the space had been prepared for welcome guests rather than desperate strangers. "Mr. Miller is a good man, Mrs. Chen said quietly, arranging towels on the washstand. "He won't ask anything of you that you're not ready to give. You're safe here, Mrs. Bennett." "Thank you," Olivia whispered, and this time she could not stop the tears. Mrs. Chen patted her hand with rough kindness. "Get those children settled and get some rest yourself. Things will look better in the morning. They always do." By the time Olivia had gotten all three children washed and into nightclothes from the trunk, fed and settled into the beds with clean sheets and soft pillows, she was trembling with exhaustion. She tucked Clara in first, smoothing her daughter's hair back from her forehead. "Are we going to stay here, Mama?" Clara whispered. "For a little while, sweetheart, just until we figure things out. I like Mr. Miller, he was nice to me." "Yes, he was." Olivia kissed her forehead. "Sleep now." Thomas was already half asleep, but he roused enough to ask, "Is Papa coming back?" The question pierced her heart. "I don't know, darling, but whatever happens, we'll be all right, I promise." Margaret did not wake at all, simply curled into the pillow with her thumb in her mouth, peaceful in the way only very young children could be after a frightening day. Olivia stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching them sleep, and let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. Samuel had left them. Her husband, the man who had vowed to love and protect her, had abandoned his wife and three children without a backward glance. The betrayal was stunning in its completeness. But as she descended the stairs, intending to thank Quinton properly before retreating to her own room, she found herself thinking less about what she had lost and more about what she had found. Quinton was still sitting in the main room, a book open on his lap but his eyes distant, as if his mind was elsewhere. He looked up when she entered, setting the book aside immediately. "They settled?" he asked. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Miller. I don't know how to express my gratitude. You've saved us from a truly desperate situation." He stood, uncomfortable with her formal thanks. "It's just Quinton, please, and you don't need to thank me. I'm glad I was there at the right time." He hesitated, then said carefully, "I don't mean to pry, but do you think your husband will come back?" Olivia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. "No, I don't think he will. Samuel has been unhappy for a long time. I think leaving us was his solution." "Then he's a fool." The words came out harsh, and Quinton immediately softened his tone. "Forgive me, but any man who would abandon a family like yours has less sense than God gave a mule." Despite everything, Olivia felt a small smile tug at her lips. "Perhaps. But his foolishness doesn't change our circumstances. I have three children to care for and very little money. I'll need to find work, somewhere to live. I can't impose on your generosity indefinitely." "You're not imposing, and there's no rush. Take some time to catch your breath, figure out your next steps. I could use help around here, actually. Mrs. Chen has been after me to hire someone to help with the house and the cooking. She's not as young as she used to be, and her husband needs her help more in the barn these days." Olivia studied him carefully, trying to determine if this was genuine or if he was simply being kind. "You're offering me employment, if you're interested. Room and board for you and the children, plus wages. It's hard work, I won't lie about that, but it's honest and you'd be safe. The children could help with age-appropriate chores, earn their keep in small ways." He met her eyes steadily. "I know you have no reason to trust me, Mrs. Bennett, but I give you my word as a man of honor that you and your children will be treated with respect under my roof." It was too much, too generous, too perfect. Olivia's suspicious nature, honed by years with a dishonest man, looked for the trap, but she could not find it in Quinton's clear gaze, in the honest set of his shoulders, in the way he had treated her children with nothing but kindness. And the alternative was to take her $4 and try to make a life in town with no connections and three hungry mouths to feed. "I would like to accept your offer," she said slowly. "On a trial basis. If it doesn't work out for either of us, we should both feel free to end the arrangement." Relief flooded Quinton's features. "That's more than fair. We'll start tomorrow. For tonight, just rest. You look dead on your feet." Olivia nodded, suddenly aware of just how exhausted she was. "Good night, then, and Quinton, thank you, truly." "Good night, Olivia." She was halfway up the stairs before she realized he had used her given name, and that she had given him permission to do so without thinking. It should have felt improper, too familiar too soon, but somehow it just felt right. The morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up from the kitchen. Olivia woke disoriented, taking a moment to remember where she was and why. When memory returned, she braced herself for the crushing weight of grief and shame, but found instead a curious sense of lightness. She was free. The realization was stunning. For the first time in 9 years of marriage, she was free of Samuel's moods, his drinking, his constant disappointment in her. The price had been steep, but the liberation was real. She dressed quickly in one of her two good dresses, pinned her honey-colored hair into a neat bun, and went to wake the children. They were already stirring, Thomas and Clara whispering to each other in the brightening room. Margaret sat up rubbing her eyes, her blonde curls a wild halo around her head. "Are we still at the nice man's house?" Margaret asked, her voice still thick with sleep. "Yes, darling, and we're going to stay here for a while. Mr. Miller has offered me a job." Clara's face brightened. "Really?" "We can stay. We can stay." The joy on her children's faces made Olivia's eyes sting with tears. They had been so unhappy for so long, living in the shadow of their father's failures and anger. To see them light up at the prospect of staying in this place, with this kind stranger, told her everything she needed to know about the life they had been living. Downstairs, Mrs. Chen had laid out a breakfast that made Olivia's mouth water. There were scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh bread with butter and jam, and milk for the children. Quinton was already at the table, cleaned up from whatever early morning chores he had completed, his hair still damp from washing. He smiled when he saw them. "Morning. I hope you all slept well." "Like the dead," Thomas said cheerfully, then seemed to realize what he had said and flushed. "I mean really well, sir." Quinton's eyes crinkled with amusement. "I knew what you meant, son. Come on and eat up. I thought maybe after breakfast I could show you all around the ranch, if your mama agrees." The children looked to Olivia with such hopeful expressions that she could not have refused even if she had wanted to. "I think that would be lovely." Breakfast was a surprisingly comfortable affair. Quinton had an easy way with the children, asking them questions about their interests and listening to their answers with genuine attention. He learned that Clara loved to read but had few books, that Thomas was fascinated by animals and wanted to learn everything about horses, that Margaret liked flowers and collecting pretty rocks. He filed away each piece of information as if it mattered, as if these children mattered, and Olivia felt her guard lowering another notch. After breakfast, Quinton led them on a tour of the ranch. It was an impressive operation, Olivia quickly realized. He raised horses, breeding and training them for sale across the territories. The current stock included about 40 animals in various stages of training, from young foals to fully broken mounts ready for work. He also kept cattle, chickens, and a large vegetable garden that Mrs. Chen tended with fierce pride. "The ranch belonged to my father," Quinton explained as they walked. "He built it from nothing, starting with one horse and a lot of determination. When he died 5 years ago, he left it to me. I've been working to expand it, improve the bloodlines, build a reputation for quality animals." "It's beautiful," Olivia said sincerely. The land stretched out in rolling hills covered with prairie grass and wildflowers, dotted with stands of trees that provided shade and shelter. A creek ran through the property, ensuring water year-round. It was peaceful in a way that made her chest ache with longing. This was what she had imagined when Samuel had talked of going west, this kind of beauty and possibility. Thomas was enthralled by the horses, pressing close to the fence to watch them move. Quinton lifted him up to sit on the top rail, one hand steady on the boy's back to keep him secure. "That bay mare there, that's Delilah. She just had a foal 3 weeks ago. See the little one with the white star on his forehead? He's so small," Thomas breathed. "He'll grow. In a few years he'll be as big as his mama. Maybe bigger if he takes after his sire. Can I pet him? Not today. He's still too young and his mama is protective. But in a few weeks, when he's more comfortable with people, I'll let you help me handle him. Would you like that?" Thomas nodded so vigorously Olivia feared he would tumble from his perch, but Quinton held him steady. Clara was more interested in the garden, crouching down to examine the neat rows of vegetables with careful fingers. Margaret toddled after butterflies, her laughter ringing out clear and bright in the morning air. Watching Quinton patiently answer Thomas's endless questions and smile at Margaret's antics, Olivia felt something shift inside her. It was too soon to put a name to it, too dangerous to acknowledge, but it was there nonetheless. A warmth, a flutter, a sense of possibility she had thought long dead. The days fell into a rhythm with surprising ease. Olivia took over much of the cooking and housework, working alongside Mrs. Chen to manage the household. The older woman was a patient teacher, showing her how to make bread that rose properly, how to manage the large wood-burning stove, how to preserve vegetables for the winter months ahead. The work was hard but satisfying in a way Olivia's previous life had never been. She was contributing, earning her place, building something rather than simply surviving. The children thrived. Clara discovered Quinton's small library and spent hours curled up in the window seat reading everything she could get her hands on. Quinton encouraged this, sometimes reading aloud to her in the evenings, their voices a pleasant murmur that Olivia listened to while she mended or knitted. Thomas became Chen's shadow, following the older Chinese man around the barn and learning the care of horses with single-minded devotion. Margaret was too young for chores, but she helped Mrs. Chen in the garden, her small hands carefully picking beans and tomatoes under the housekeeper's watchful eye. And Olivia found herself drawn to Quinton in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. He was nothing like Samuel. Where her husband had been quick to anger and criticism, Quinton was patient and encouraging. Where Samuel had been selfish and thoughtless, Quinton was generous and considerate. He worked from dawn until dusk, but never complained. He spoke to everyone with respect, from Mrs. Chen to the ranch hands who came by periodically to help with larger jobs. He was strong without being domineering, confident without being arrogant. 3 weeks after their arrival, Olivia was in the kitchen kneading bread when Quinton came in through the back door, dust, covered and sweating from working with the horses. He grabbed the dipper from the water bucket and drank deeply, and Olivia found herself watching the movement of his throat, the breadth of his shoulders, the way his shirt clung to his back. When he turned and caught her staring, heat flooded her cheeks. "Sorry, I'm making a mess," he said, apparently misinterpreting her attention. "I'll clean up before supper. It's fine. You work hard. You're entitled to come into your own home however you please." Quinton set down the dipper and leaned against the counter, studying her with those remarkable eyes. "How are you settling in? Really? Better than I had any right to expect. The children are happy, I have work that I enjoy, you've been more than generous, and are you happy?" The question caught her off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked her that? When was the last time her happiness had mattered to anyone, including herself? "I'm content," she said carefully. "That's more than I've been in a very long time." Quinton nodded slowly. "Content is a start. But you deserve more than that, Olivia. You deserve to be happy." Before she could respond, Margaret came running in, chattering about a butterfly she had seen, and the moment passed. But Olivia thought about his words all through supper, through the evening chores, through tucking the children into bed. She thought about them as she sat in the main room with her mending, half listening to Quinton read to Clara from a book of poetry. Did she deserve to be happy? After the failure of her marriage, after her poor judgment in choosing Samuel, after dragging her children into such a precarious situation, part of her said no, that she deserved exactly what she had received. But another part, a part that was growing stronger in the sunlight and safety of this ranch, whispered that perhaps Quinton was right. Perhaps she did deserve more. That night, lying in her bed listening to the prairie wind, Olivia allowed herself to think the unthinkable. She was falling in love with Quinton Miller. It was foolish and premature and potentially disastrous, but it was true. She loved the way he laughed at Thomas's jokes, the patience he showed Clara, the gentleness with which he treated Margaret. She loved his work ethic and his integrity, and the way he looked at her sometimes, as if she was something precious and rare. She loved his hands, scarred and calloused from honest labor, and his voice, deep and steady and safe. But she was still married. Samuel had not come back, had sent no word, but the absence of her husband did not dissolve the bonds of matrimony. She was bound by law and faith to a man who had abandoned her, and any feelings she had for Quinton were therefore forbidden. The realization made her throat tight with grief. She had finally found a good man, and she could not have him. Autumn deepened into winter with the swift certainty of the plains. The first frost came in late October, silvering the grass and making the children's breath fog in the morning air. Quinton began preparing for winter in earnest, stockpiling firewood and feed, checking the integrity of the buildings, ensuring everything was ready for the cold months ahead. Olivia helped Mrs. Chen preserve the last of the garden harvest, filling the cellar with jars of vegetables and fruits that would sustain them when the snow came. On a cold November morning, a rider came to the ranch. Olivia saw him from the kitchen window, a stranger on a tired horse, and felt a flash of fear. Visitors were rare, and unexpected visitors could mean trouble. She watched as Quinton emerged from the barn to greet the man, their conversation too distant to hear. After a few minutes, Quinton turned toward the house, his expression carefully neutral in a way that made her stomach clench. "Olivia, could you come out here, please?" She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch, suddenly cold despite the shawl around her shoulders. The stranger was a thin man with a sharp face and shrewd eyes. He tipped his hat to her politely enough. "Mrs. Bennett." "Name's Harper. I'm a deputy from Nevada. I have some news about your husband." Olivia's world tilted. "He's coming back." "No, madam. I'm afraid Samuel Bennett was found dead in a rooming house in Kansas City 3 weeks ago. Looks like he drank himself to death. The landlady found some papers with your name and this town. Took a while to track you down. I'm sorry for your loss." She should feel something, Olivia thought distantly. Grief, shock, something. But all she felt was a strange numbness, as if the news was happening to someone else. Samuel was dead. The man she had married, the father of her children, was gone, not through abandonment but through his own weakness and excess. "I see," she heard herself say. "Thank you for informing me." "There's a bit more, madam. He died with debts. The landlady wants payment for his room and board. There's also a gambling debt to a man in Kansas City. They're saying you're responsible as his widow." Now the shock came, sharp and cold. "How much?" "About $100, all told. $100. It might as well have been 1,000. She had been saving her wages from Quinton, but she had maybe $20 to her name. Not enough. Nowhere near enough. She felt the ground crumbling beneath her feet once more, the brief stability of the last 2 months revealed as the illusion it had always been. "She's not responsible for debts he incurred after abandoning his family," Quinton said, his voice hard. "Any decent lawyer would argue that. Maybe so, but they'll still come after her if she doesn't pay. That gambling debt especially. The man he owes isn't the forgiving type." Olivia sank down onto the porch step, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Dead. Samuel was dead, and even in death he was still making her life difficult. It would have been funny if it were not so awful. "I'll take care of it," Quinton said. "No." Olivia looked up at him, shaking her head. "No, you've done enough, more than enough. This is my burden." "The hell it is." Quinton crouched in front of her, his eyes fierce. "You didn't incur these debts. He did. He abandoned you and then drank himself to death, and now these vultures want to pick your bones. I won't allow it." "It's not your responsibility." "I'm making it my responsibility. Deputy, I'll cover the debts. Get me the names and addresses and I'll send payment. But Mrs. Bennett is not to be contacted about this again. Are we clear?" The deputy looked between them, a knowing gleam in his eyes. "Clear as creek water, Mr. Miller. I'll get you those details before I leave town." He tipped his hat again. "My condolences, madam. For what it's worth, you seem better off without him." After he rode away, Olivia sat frozen on the step, trying to process everything. Samuel was dead. She was a widow. The children had lost their father, even if he had been a poor one, and Quinton was going to pay $100 to settle her dead husband's debts. "You shouldn't have done that," she said finally. "Would you rather I let them come after you? Maybe take what little you have? Or worse, I could have figured something out." "Why should you have to?" Quinton sat beside her on the step, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cold air. "Olivia, you're not alone anymore. You don't have to fight every battle by yourself." "But $100, Quinton, that's a fortune." "It's money. I have enough. The ranch does well. This won't ruin me, I promise." He hesitated, then added gently, "How are you feeling about your husband?" Olivia considered lying, offering the pretty grief that society expected. But she was tired of lying, tired of pretending. "Relieved," she admitted, the word feeling like both confession and absolution. "God forgive me, but I'm relieved. I'm sad for the man he might have been, sad that my children lost their father, but I'm relieved that he's gone." "Does that make me a terrible person?" "No, it makes you honest." Quinton's hand found hers, his fingers warm and solid around her cold ones. "He hurt you, Olivia. He abandoned you and your children. You're entitled to feel however you feel about his death." They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped, watching the wind blow through the dried grass. Olivia felt the truth of her situation settling over her like a cloak. She was free, truly free. Widowed, yes, but free from the bonds that had held her to a man who had made her miserable. The thought was dizzying in its possibility. "The children will need to be told," she said quietly. "Would you like me to be there when you tell them?" "Yes, yes, I think I would." They told the children that evening, all three of them gathered in the main room with the fire crackling and the lamps lit against the darkening night. Clara cried, though Olivia suspected it was more from the finality of it than from any real grief. Thomas was quiet, processing in his own way. Margaret was too young to really understand death, though she seemed to sense the solemnity of the moment. "Is Mr. Miller going to be our papa now?" Margaret asked innocently, and Olivia felt her face flush hot. "That's not how it works, sweetheart," she said gently, carefully not looking at Quinton. But later, after the children were in bed and she and Quinton were alone in the kitchen sharing coffee, the question hung in the air between them. Quinton stirred his cup slowly, his eyes distant. "Would it be so terrible?" he asked quietly. "Me being their father," Olivia's heart stuttered. What are you asking me, Quinton? I'm asking if you've noticed what I've noticed, the way we fit together, the way the children have settled here, the way I look forward to seeing you every morning, and the way my house feels empty when you're not in it. He set down his cup and turned to face her fully. I'm asking if I'm alone in feeling like this arrangement has become something more than employer and employee. You're not alone, Olivia whispered. But Quinton Samuel has only been dead a few hours. People will talk, they'll say terrible things. Let them talk, I don't care what people say. But I do, I have 3 children to think about, their reputations matter. Quinton nodded slowly. You're right, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's just. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I've been half in love with you since the night I found you at that station, Olivia. Watching you with your children, seeing your strength and courage, the way you've built a life here. You're remarkable, and I want the chance to court you properly to see if this feeling between us is real. It's real, Olivia said, her voice barely audible. At least it is for me. But you're right that we need to wait. A respectable mourning period. Time for the children to adjust. Time for us to be sure. How long? 6 months. In the spring, if we both still feel the same way, we can begin courting properly. It was an eternity and an eye blink all at once. 6 months of living in the same house, working side by side, wanting something they could not yet have. But it was also the right thing to do, the proper thing. Olivia had spent too many years living with a man who cared nothing for propriety or doing right. She would not start this new chapter the same way. 6 months, Quinton agreed. But Olivia, I'm not going to change my mind. I already know what I want. So do I, she admitted. But let's do this right. Winter came in earnest, bringing snow and ice and long dark nights. The ranch work slowed but did not stop. Horses still needed tending, cattle still needed feeding, and the daily tasks of survival filled the daylight hours. Olivia and Quinton maintained a careful distance, proper and restrained, but the awareness between them was a constant hum beneath every interaction. Christmas came, and Quinton surprised them all with gifts. Books for Clara, carefully selected from a catalog and ordered months in advance. A wooden horse for Thomas, hand-carved during the long evening hours. A doll for Margaret with a painted face and a dress that Mrs. Chen had sewn in secret. For Olivia, a length of deep blue fabric fine enough for a dress far nicer than anything she had owned in years. Quinton, this is too much, she protested, running her hands over the smooth material. It's not enough, he said quietly, his eyes warm. But it's what I can give you for now. She made the dress during the long winter evenings, her fingers careful on the fine fabric. Mrs. Chen helped with the fitting, tut-tutting over how thin Olivia had gotten and insisting she needed to eat more. As the dress took shape, Olivia allowed herself to imagine wearing it for Quinton when spring came, allowed herself to dream of a future that had seemed impossible just a few months ago. The children continued to flourish. Clara was reading at a level far beyond her years, devouring books and asking questions that delighted Quinton and challenged Olivia. Thomas had become Chen's right hand in the barn, learning not just the care of horses, but also their training. He had a gift for it, the older man reported, a gentle touch and an instinctive understanding that could not be taught. Margaret grew taller and more articulate, her vocabulary expanding daily as she chattered to anyone who would listen. On a bitter cold day in February, Olivia found Quinton in the barn working with a young stallion. The horse was spirited, testing his boundaries, and Quinton was patiently working through the resistance. She stood in the doorway watching him, admiring the lean strength of his body, the calm authority in his voice as he spoke to the animal. When he finally noticed her, he smiled and tied off the horse. "Everything all right? I wanted to talk to you about something." Olivia came into the barn, closing the door behind her to keep out the cold. "Spring will be here in a few weeks. Are you counting the days?" His tone was teasing, but his eyes were serious. "I am," she admitted. "Quinton, I need to know if you've changed your mind. If these months have shown you that this was a mistake. Have you changed yours?" "Not even slightly. I love you more now than I did in November, but I need to know where you stand before I let myself hope too much." Quinton crossed the space between them in 3 strides, and then his hands were cupping her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with a tenderness that made her eyes sting. "I haven't changed my mind. I won't change my mind. I want to marry you, Olivia Bennett. I want to be a father to your children and build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want everything." "So do I," she breathed. "Can I kiss you?" "I know it's still too soon for propriety, but I've been dreaming about kissing you for months, and I don't think I can wait another second." Instead of answering, Olivia rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, exploring. But then Quinton made a low sound in his throat and deepened it, his arms coming around her to pull her close. Olivia melted into him, into the strength and warmth of his embrace, into the promise of his mouth on hers. It felt like coming home. It felt like every good thing she had ever wanted and never dared to hope for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinton rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me. As soon as the mourning period is over. I don't want to wait any longer than we have to." "Yes," Olivia said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you." They decided on a date in late April after the snows had melted and the prairie had begun to green again. It gave them time to make preparations, to let the community know of their intentions, to allow the children to adjust to the idea of Quinton becoming their father in truth as well as in practice. The response from their neighbors was largely positive. The story of the abandoned woman and the kind cowboy who took her and having already made the rounds. There were a few who whispered about unseemly haste, but they were in the minority. Olivia wrote to her parents in Ohio, informing them of Samuel's death and her impending remarriage. She had not spoken to them in years, the distance and the cost of postage making communication difficult, but she wanted them to know. Their response came 6 weeks later, a brief letter expressing relief that she was safe and well cared for, and surprise that she had landed on her feet so quickly. There was no judgment in the words, only the tired acceptance of people who had worried for their daughter and were grateful she had found happiness. As the wedding date approached, Olivia found herself caught between anticipation and nervousness. She had been married before, and it had been a disaster. What if she was making another mistake? What if the life she and Quinton had built during the winter could not withstand the reality of marriage? On the night before the wedding, as she was putting Margaret to bed, Clara appeared in the doorway. "Mama, can we talk?" "Of course, sweetheart." Olivia tucked Margaret in and followed Clara to the girls' room, sitting beside her daughter on the bed. "What's on your mind?" "Are you sure about marrying Mr. Miller?" "I'm very sure." "Why do you ask?" Clara twisted her hands in her nightgown, her young face serious. "I just don't want you to be sad again. Papa made you sad all the time. I don't want Mr. Miller to do that too." Olivia's heart broke a little at the perceptiveness in her daughter's words. "Oh, Clara, Mr. Miller is nothing like your father. He's kind and good and he cares about all of us. I promise you, I'm not going to be sad." "He makes you smile," Clara said quietly. "I've never seen you smile as much as you do now." "He does make me smile. He makes me happy. And I think he'll be a wonderful father to you and Thomas and Margaret. But if you have doubts, if you don't want this, I need to know." "I want it," Clara said quickly. I love Mr. Miller. He reads to me, and he answers all my questions, and he never gets angry when I ask too many. I just wanted to make sure you were happy." "I'm so happy, sweetheart. Happier than I've been in a very long time." Clara hugged her tight, and Olivia held her daughter close, grateful beyond words for the resilience and strength of her children. They had been through so much, and they had emerged not broken but stronger. Tomorrow, they would all take another step forward together. The wedding was a simple affair in the small church in Nevada, attended by Mrs. Chen and her husband, a few neighboring ranchers, and the minister's wife who had helped Olivia alter her mother's wedding dress to fit. The dress was old-fashioned, but made of good lace and satin that had survived the years. Olivia wore wildflowers in her hair, gathered by Margaret that morning with great ceremony. Standing at the altar, watching Quinton's face as she walked down the aisle with Clara, Thomas, and Margaret at her sides, Olivia felt the last of her fears fall away. This was right. This man, this life, this second chance at happiness that she had never expected and did not deserve but was being given anyway. Quinton's eyes were bright with emotion as she reached him, and when he took her hands, his grip was steady and sure. The vows were traditional, the same words spoken by countless couples before them, but they felt sacred and new in Olivia's mouth. To have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer in sickness and in health, until death do us part. She meant every word with a ferocity that surprised her. She would love this man with everything she had. She would build a life with him that honored the gift he had given her and her children. When the minister pronounced them man and wife and told Quinton he could kiss his bride, the kiss was chaste and proper for their audience, but Olivia felt the promise in it. Tonight, when they were alone, there would be more. Tonight, they would truly begin their lives as husband and wife. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with Mrs. Chen outdoing herself with food and even a small cake decorated with spring flowers. The children were giddy with excitement, running through the house with an energy that spoke of relief and joy. Thomas had taken to calling Quinton Pa already, the word slipping out naturally as if it had always belonged there. Clara was more reserved, but Olivia had seen the way she looked at Quinton, with trust and affection that warmed her heart. Margaret, with the easy acceptance of the very young, seemed to have forgotten she had ever had another father. As the sun set and the guests departed, Olivia found herself alone with her new husband for the first time as a married woman. They stood on the porch watching the sky turn gold and pink, Quinton's arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "Happy?" he asked softly, ecstatically. "Good, that's how I want you to feel every day for the rest of our lives." Olivia turned in his arms, looking up at him with all the love she felt shining in her eyes. "I love you, Quinton Miller. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for giving us a home and a future." "You saved me too," he said seriously. "This house was so empty before you came. I didn't even realize how lonely I was until I found you at that station. You and the children, you filled up all the empty spaces I didn't know I had." They kissed as the stars began to emerge, soft and deep and full of promise. Then, hand in hand, they went inside to the life they had built together, to the family they had become, to the future that stretched bright and hopeful before them. The first year of their marriage was everything Olivia had hoped for and more. Quinton was an attentive and loving husband, patient with her nervousness in the marriage bed, passionate once she had learned to trust him completely. They worked side by side during the day and came together at night, building not just a physical intimacy, but an emotional one that went deeper than anything Olivia had ever experienced. The children continued to thrive under Quinton's gentle guidance. He taught Thomas everything he knew about horses, and the boy's skill grew daily. Clara discovered a love of writing to go along with her reading, filling notebooks with stories and observations that showed a keen intelligence. Margaret grew from a toddler into a little girl with opinions and personality, charming everyone she met with her sunny disposition. In the spring of 1880, 2 years after Olivia had stood abandoned at the train station with 3 children and no hope, she stood in the same place watching as a train arrived. But this time, she was not alone. Quinton stood beside her, his hand warm around hers, and the children clustered around them with excited chatter. They were picking up Quinton's cousin from Kansas, a young man who wanted to learn the ranching trade. "You're a million miles away," Quinton said softly, reading her expression. "What are you thinking about? The last time I was at this station, how scared I was, how certain I was that my life was over. And now I know it was just beginning." She looked up at him, this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved, who had given her love and security and a home. "Now I know that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are just the doorway to the best ones." The train pulled in with a hiss of steam and a squeal of brakes. As passengers began to disembark, Clara tugged on Olivia's sleeve. "Mama, will Cousin James like it here?" "I think he will, sweetheart. How could anyone not love it here?" Quinton squeezed her hand, his eyes warm with the love that had only grown deeper with time. "Welcome home," he had said to her that first night, and she had not understood then what he meant. But she understood now. Home was not a place. Home was this man and these children and the life they had built together from the ashes of her old one. The years continued to unfold with the rhythm of ranch life. They added to their family in the fall of 1881, when Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Zachary. Quinton wept when he held his son for the first time, overcome with emotion at this proof of their love and commitment. The older children doted on their baby brother, Clara especially taking to the role of big sister with serious dedication. 2 years later came another son, Benjamin, completing their family. The house that had once felt too large and empty now rang with the sounds of children's laughter and footsteps, with the organized chaos of a large and loving family. Olivia sometimes paused in her work to simply listen, to drink in the sounds of her children playing and Quinton's voice as he taught them about the world, and felt her heart would burst with gratitude. Thomas grew into a fine young man with a gift for horses that exceeded even Quinton's considerable skill. At 18, he began training horses not just for the ranch but for other buyers across the territory, building a reputation that brought prosperity to the family. Clara's writing developed into genuine talent, and she published her first story in a Kansas City newspaper at 16, a small triumph that made them all proud. Margaret grew beautiful and sweet-tempered, with a gift for growing things that made the ranch gardens the envy of the county. The younger boys, Zachary and Benjamin, grew up knowing nothing but love and security. They never knew the fear that had marked their older siblings' early years, never experienced the uncertainty of having a father who was unreliable and cruel. They grew strong and confident, secure in the knowledge that they were wanted and loved. Quinton's ranch prospered, growing from 40 horses to more than 100. He became known throughout Missouri and Kansas as a breeder of fine stock, and buyers came from as far as Texas to purchase his animals. The money allowed them comforts Olivia had never dreamed of. A new addition to the house with indoor plumbing, pretty dresses for the girls, education for all the children that went beyond the basics. But for all the material success, it was the quiet moments Olivia treasured most. Evenings on the porch with Quinton, watching the sunset and talking about their day. Sunday dinners with all 5 children around the table, laughing and arguing and simply being together. The way Quinton still looked at her after 10 years of marriage as if she was the most precious thing in his world. The security of knowing she was loved, deeply and permanently, in a way she had once believed was impossible for her. On a warm summer evening in 1888, 10 years to the day after Quinton had found her at the station, Olivia stood on that same porch watching her family. Thomas was working with a young mare in the corral, his movements sure and confident. Clara sat under a tree with a notebook, writing her latest story while Margaret braided wildflowers into a crown nearby. The 2 younger boys were playing some elaborate game that involved stick horses and a lot of shouting. And Quinton stood beside her, his arm around her waist, solid and steady and eternally hers. "You ever think about that day?" Quinton asked softly. "The day I found you." "All the time," Olivia admitted. "I think about how scared I was, how certain I was that my life was over. How close I came to refusing your help out of pride or fear. I'm glad you didn't refuse. I'm glad you took a chance on me. You took a chance on me first. You saw a desperate woman with 3 children and no prospects, and you saw something worth saving." "I saw the woman I was going to marry," Quinton said simply. "I knew it that first day, even if I couldn't admit it to myself yet. I looked at you standing there so proud and scared and determined, and I knew my life had just changed forever." Olivia leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of him, horse and hay and the soap he used. "I love you, Quinton Miller, more today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." "That's my line," he said, laughing. It was something he told her often, a promise that his love would only grow with time. And it had been true. Every day, every year, their love had deepened and strengthened, becoming the foundation on which their entire lives were built. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Olivia and Quinton sat on their porch and watched the stars emerge. The prairie stretched out before them, endless and beautiful, full of possibility. Somewhere out there were people facing the same desperation she had once known, the same fear and uncertainty. She said a prayer for them, that they too would find their Quinton, their second chance, their happy ending, because that was what she had found against all odds and expectations. She had been abandoned at a train station with 3 children and $4 to her name, certain that her life was over. And instead, she had found the love of her life, a man who had looked at her with kind eyes and said, "I have room for all." Those simple words had changed everything, had opened the door to a life so much richer and fuller than anything she had imagined. As if reading her thoughts, Quinton pulled her closer and kissed her temple. "What are you thinking about, wife of mine?" "I'm thinking that I'm the luckiest woman in the world. I'm thinking that every hard thing I went through was worth it because it led me here to you, to this life." "I'm the lucky one," Quinton countered. "You gave me everything I never knew I wanted. A family, a purpose, someone to build a life with. You made this house a home." "We did it together," Olivia said firmly. "That's what makes it work. We're a team, you and I, the best team I know." Quinton stood and pulled her to her feet. "Come to bed, Olivia. Tomorrow will come early and I want to make the most of tonight." She followed him inside, this man who had saved her, who had loved her, who had given her the world. In their bedroom, with the moonlight streaming through the windows and the prairie wind singing outside, they came together with the passion and tenderness of a love well established, but never taken for granted. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Olivia drifted toward sleep thinking about how far she had come, how much she had gained. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and occasional challenges. There were hard winters when they worried about the horses, dry summers when the creek ran low and they rationed water carefully. There were illnesses and accidents, the normal trials of a large family living a physical life on the land. But through it all, Olivia and Quinton faced everything together, their partnership unshakable. Clara married at 21, a schoolteacher from Kansas City who loved her writing and encouraged her talent. They settled in town but visited often, eventually giving Olivia and Quinton their first grandchild, a little girl with Clara's dark hair and serious eyes. Thomas married a neighboring rancher's daughter and built his own horse training operation on land that Quinton helped him purchase, staying close to the family that had shaped him. Margaret found love with a young doctor and moved to St. Louis, though she wrote faithfully and returned every summer with her growing brood of children. Zachary and Benjamin, growing up secure in their parents' love and their family's prosperity, both chose to stay on the ranch, working alongside their father to build the operation into one of the most successful in the region. The ranch that Quinton's father had started with one horse, and a dream had become a legacy that would pass through generations. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Olivia and Quinton stood once more at the train station in Nevada, Missouri. They were older now, with silver threading through their hair and lines on their faces earned through years of hard work and laughter. But Quinton's eyes still lit up when he looked at her, and Olivia's heart still skipped when he smiled. "I was thinking we should do something special to mark the occasion," Quinton said, his arm around her waist as they waited for the train that would bring their children and grandchildren for the celebration Mrs. Chen was orchestrating at the ranch. "Maybe take a trip, just the two of us. See some of the country we never got around to exploring." "I'd like that," Olivia said, leaning into him. "Though honestly, Quinton, I have everything I need right here. This town, our ranch, our family. I don't need to see the world when my world is already perfect. It is perfect, isn't it?" Quinton mused. "Not perfect because nothing ever goes wrong, but perfect because we face everything together, because we built something real and lasting." The train whistle sounded in the distance, and Olivia felt a flutter of excitement. All of her children were coming home, bringing their spouses and children, filling the ranch house with the noise and love of 3 generations. It was everything she had dreamed of during those dark years with Samuel, everything she had thought was forever beyond her reach. "Do you remember the first thing you said to me?" Olivia asked suddenly. "Right here on this platform. I asked if you were waiting for the eastbound," Quinton said, his voice soft with memory. "And you said you were waiting for your husband who you feared would not return. And then you said you had room for all of us. Just like that, without hesitation. You changed my life with those words." "I changed my own life too," Quinton said. "I just didn't know it yet. I thought I was being charitable, helping a woman in need. I didn't understand that you were the answer to every prayer. I had never known how to pray." The train pulled into the station with the familiar sounds of steam and steel. As the passengers began to disembark, Olivia saw Clara first, her eldest daughter, now a woman of 33 with children of her own. Then Thomas, tall and strong and so much like Quinton in his bearing. Margaret, lovely in a fashionable dress, holding the hands of her 2 youngest. And surrounding them, children of varying ages, all chattering excitedly about seeing Grandma and Grandpa's ranch again. They swarmed around Olivia and Quinton, hugs and kisses, and the delightful chaos of a family reunion. Zachary and Benjamin had brought wagons to transport everyone back to the ranch, and the process of loading people and luggage was loud and joyful. Standing in the middle of it all, Olivia caught Quinton's eye across the platform. He winked at her, and she smiled back, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. This was what love looked like, she thought. Not just the romance and passion, though those were still present even after 25 years. But this bigger love, this family they had created together, these lives they had shaped and nurtured. Every child, every grandchild, every moment of happiness was a testament to the choice they had made to build a life together. The celebration at the ranch lasted 3 days, with Mrs. Chen cooking enough food to feed an army and everyone pitching in to make the event memorable. There was music and dancing, stories shared and memories made. The grandchildren ran wild through the house and barns, experiencing the same freedom their parents had once known. And at the center of it all were Olivia and Quinton, surrounded by the evidence of their love made manifest. On the final evening, after most of the guests had retired and the house was settling into quiet, Olivia found Quinton in the barn. He was checking on a mare who was close to foaling, his hands gentle on the animal's swollen belly. She came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. "I was thinking about that day again," she said. "The day you found me, I realized something." "What's that?" "I used to think of that day as the worst day of my life. The day I was abandoned, left with nothing. But it wasn't the worst day. It was the best day because it was the day I met you. It was the beginning of everything good." Quinton turned to her, his eyes bright in the lamplight. "You know what I think? I think we were both lost until we found each other. I was going through the motions, running the ranch, existing but not really living. And then there you were, this brave, beautiful woman who needed help but also needed someone to believe in her. You gave me purpose, Olivia. You gave me a reason to be the man I always wanted to be." "We saved each other," Olivia said softly. "That's what love does. It saves us from our loneliness, our fear, our belief that we're not enough. You showed me I was worthy of love. You showed me what a good man looks like. And you loved my children as if they were your own blood, never making them feel less than Zachary and Benjamin." "They are my own," Quinton said fiercely. "Clara and Thomas and Margaret, they are mine just as much as the boys. The moment I saw them at that station, they became mine. Biology doesn't make a father. Love does. Choice does. Showing up every day and being there does." It was true. Thomas still called him Pa, had done so for 25 years without ever looking back. Clara's children called him Grandpa, and never knew he had not always been part of their mother's life. Margaret had included him in her wedding ceremony, walking her down the aisle because he was her father in every way that mattered. The boys had never known any father but Quinton, and they had grown up secure in the knowledge that they were loved and wanted. The mare shifted, and Quinton returned his attention to her, speaking softly as he checked her over one final time. Satisfied that she was not in immediate labor, he extinguished the lamp and took Olivia's hand, leading her back toward the house. The night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead in the way they only were on the prairie, far from city lights. "I want to do this forever," Olivia said as they walked. "Grow old with you, watch our family expand, build a legacy that lasts beyond our years." "Then that's what we'll do," Quinton said simply. "I'll love you until my last breath, Olivia Miller, and probably beyond that if God allows it." They kissed under the stars, surrounded by the land they had worked and the home they had built, and Olivia felt the certainty of their love settle over her like a blessing. This was her life now. Not the scared woman at the train station, not the wife of a man who had abandoned her, but this. Wife of Quinton Miller, mother of 5, grandmother of many, rancher and homemaker, and so much more than she had ever believed possible. The years continued their inevitable march. Olivia and Quinton grew older, their pace slowing but their love never dimming. The ranch passed increasingly into the hands of Zachary and Benjamin, though Quinton could never quite give up his morning rounds, checking on the horses and talking to the hands. Olivia's hands grew gnarled with arthritis, making the fine needlework she had once loved more difficult, but she adapted, finding new ways to contribute and be useful. More grandchildren came, and then great-grandchildren, a sprawling family tree that all traced back to that September day in 1878, when a desperate woman and a compassionate cowboy had met at a train station. The story became family legend, told and retold at gatherings, embellished and romanticized but always containing the essential truth. That love could appear in the darkest moments, that kindness could change lives, that family was built on choice as much as blood. On a warm spring morning in 1903, Olivia woke in the bed she had shared with Quinton for 25 years and reached for him instinctively. He was there, as he always was, his hair white now but his eyes still that remarkable blue-green. They were both in their 70s, their bodies worn but their spirits unbroken. "Good morning, wife of mine," Quinton said, his voice rougher with age but still as warm as the day she had met him. "Good morning, husband of mine," she replied, the words as natural as breathing after a quarter-century. They rose and dressed, moving through their morning routine with the practiced ease of people who knew each other utterly. Breakfast was prepared, though Mrs. Chen had long since retired, and her daughter now managed the household. Zachary and Benjamin and their families had built homes on the property, creating a compound of sorts where 3 generations lived and worked together. After breakfast, Quinton insisted on walking to the creek, something they did most mornings when weather permitted. Olivia took his arm and they made their way slowly across the prairie, their steps measured but steady. The land was greening up beautifully, the spring rains having been generous. Foals frolicked in the pastures, the next generation of Miller horses beginning their lives. At the creek, they sat on a bench that Quinton had built years ago, watching the water flow and listening to the birds sing. It was peaceful in a way that spoke to souls well satisfied with the lives they had lived. "You ever have regrets?" Olivia asked suddenly. "About that day, about taking on a widow with 3 children and all the complications that came with it?" Quinton turned to her, his expression fierce despite his age. "Not one single regret, not one single moment where I wished I had left you at that station. Olivia, you were the best thing that ever happened to me. You and the children, you gave my life meaning and purpose. Without you, I would have just been a man raising horses. With you, I got to be a husband and a father. I got to build a legacy. I got to love and be loved in return." "I feel the same," Olivia said, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "You saved me, Quinton. In every way a person can be saved. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me what real love looks like. You gave my children a father they could respect and admire. Everything good in my life came from you." "Not from me," Quinton corrected gently. "From us. We did this together, Olivia. Every step of the way we chose each other and we chose this life. That's what makes it so precious." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the creek flow endlessly onward. The sun climbed higher, warming the air and bringing out the scent of new grass and wildflowers. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the ranch, horses whinnying, children laughing, the rhythmic sound of someone chopping wood. Life continuing, the legacy they had built carrying on. "I'm tired," Olivia admitted finally. "Not unhappy, just tired. Like I've run a long race and I'm ready to rest." "I know," Quinton said softly. "I feel it too. But not yet, my love. We still have time. We still have mornings like this and grandchildren to watch grow and each other. Let's not be in a hurry to reach the finish line." "All right," Olivia agreed. "But promise me something, Quinton. Promise me that when my time comes, you'll remember how happy we were, how much we loved each other. Don't spend your last years grieving. celebrate what we had. I promise, Quinton said, his voice thick with emotion, but the same goes for you. If I go first, you keep living, you keep finding joy, you honor our love by living fully. I promise, she whispered. They returned to the house slowly, taking their time, savoring the morning and each other's company. The rest of the day unfolded in its usual rhythm. Meals shared with family, chores completed, conversations had. It was ordinary in the best possible way, the kind of day that makes up a life well lived. As evening fell and they prepared for bed, Quinton held Olivia close, his arms still strong enough to make her feel safe and cherished. I love you, he murmured against her hair. More today than yesterday. And less than tomorrow, she finished, the old promise that had guided them through 25 years of marriage. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, two souls so intertwined that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the prairie they had called home for so long, they woke together and began another day, grateful for the gift of time and love, and the life they had built from the ashes of despair. Years later, when the children and grandchildren gathered to remember Olivia and Quinton Miller, the story told most often was the one about the train station. About a woman left stranded with 3 children and a cowboy who said he had room for all. About how that single act of kindness had blossomed into a love story that spanned decades and created a family that would carry their legacy forward for generations. They spoke of Quinton's gentle strength, his unwavering integrity, his capacity to love children who were not born to him as fiercely as those who were. They spoke of Olivia's courage, her determination to build a better life for her children, her transformation from a frightened, abandoned wife into a confident, beloved matriarch. And they spoke of the love between them, a love that had been tested and proven true, that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. The ranch continued, run now by the 3rd and 4th generations, still bearing the Miller name and still raising horses that were sought after across the country. The house that had once felt too large and empty was now filled with history and love, every room holding memories of the family that had filled it with life. And in the town of Nevada, Missouri, the train station where it had all begun still stood, though it was quieter now, the age of rail giving way to other forms of travel. But sometimes, on warm September evenings, people swore they could see the ghost of a cowboy tipping his hat to a desperate woman, could hear the echo of the words that had changed everything. I have room for all. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West and lasting through the changing times, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of commitment, and the transformative nature of true love. And it all started with a simple act of kindness offered without expectation of return, proving that sometimes the best things in life come from being in the right place at the right time, with an open heart and willing hands. Olivia Bennett Miller and Quinton Miller lived long, full lives surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured. When they finally left this world, within months of each other as if unable to bear separation even at the end, they did so knowing that their love had mattered, that their choices had created ripples that would extend far beyond their own lives. They had taken a moment of desperation and transformed it into decades of happiness. They had proven that it was never too late for a second chance, never too late to find the love you thought had passed you by. And in the end, that was their greatest legacy. Not the successful ranch or the large family or the material prosperity they had achieved, but the simple truth that love, real love, endures. That kindness matters. That the choice to help someone in need can change not just their life but your own. that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are just the doorway to the best ones, if we have the courage to walk through and the faith to believe that better days are ahead. The story of Olivia and Quinton lived on, passed down through generations, a reminder that fairy tales do not just exist in books, that happy endings are possible, and that sometimes, just sometimes, all you need is for someone to look at you in your darkest moment and say, "I have room for all."